While we were working on the screenplay, all we did was put in exactly what's in the book. 2 warts, a nose the size of 2 potatoes, an eyebrow, 2 eyebrows that have grown together in the middle. And we just took those exact elements and put them there.
Good evening, Mr. Brown. I am Nanny McPhee.
Oh, you're, of course. Good heavens.
When Nanny McPhee first arrives at the house, she has to make an impression. She has to be physically very different to anything that we're expecting, but she also has to be scary. And if she's scary, the prospect of her then confronting the children, who we already know to be very, very naughty, becomes very intriguing.
When Kirk came in, that's really when we began to have the discussions of how was this character going to look. And then when we brought in our costumers and our hair and makeup people, that's when we really began to have the discussion.
It had to be scary, but not too scary. It had to be funny, but it couldn't be too funny so it was so distracting. But we also had to start off somewhere quite extreme so that we could do all the changes with her and turn her back into Emma at the very end.
Today's the full whack, I think, isn't it, Jen?
First stage, yeah.
So it's the full thing. This is stage 1.
Stage 1 of 5.
Which is nose 1, earlobes 1, hairy chin wart, eyebrows meeting them in upper lip wart, teeth and plumpers, and also a lower hairline. There's a very complicated map of, when we've lost a wart, when the hairline goes back, because it's not just the obvious things being taken away, it's also tiny little minimal changes that will probably go unnoticed by the eye.
There's big, and there's 1 wart gone, 2 warts gone. Eyebrows wedding.
Eyebrows wedding, absolutely right.
The bits on her face start changing and the warts go and the eyebrows separate and things like that. At each stage she loses some weight, and it's very subtle. I mean, because she's always in black, so and the costume is quite sort of unshapely. So we're hoping that it's not obvious that she's lost weight, but you might just do a double take.
I think a lot of people, even a lot of actresses and that, have read horror stories about these prosthetics taking hours and hours and hours, and the idea of sitting in a chair for a long time when you really want to be on stage acting, or you've got to get in really early to get this piece on, it doesn't fill you with joy. But he's got it down to just over an hour for the whole lot, which is amazing, really.
Before we started, I did have a concern. I thought, oh God, it's going to be a nightmare. But the design and the build of the makeup is so clever that honestly I certainly don't notice the warts or the lobes. The nose is a little bit heavy, the first nose, but the prosthetics are so wonderful now and so well designed. It's fantastic. What I find remarkable is that when Jem stuck it on, you think, well, you're never going to be able to paint that into my face and make it look real. It just looks as though impossible, and 5 minutes later it looks as though it's part of me. So that's where the art comes in.
As she begins to change, it isn't just the warts to go. Her ears are very big when she gets there, and her ears begin to get smaller, and her hairline begins to recede. And it's a wig at the beginning, and maybe it's not a wig at the end. So that it's a very complete change, and yet ultimately, all we ever talk about in the movie, all we ever talked about in the script are just those few facial features.
Children of all ages and adults are very clear as to the physical changes that take place with Nanny McPhee, with her eyebrows and her warts and her nose. But what's interesting is that people seem to form very different opinions as to why she's changing. Some people say it's because the children are learning lessons. Other people say it's because the children are starting to see Nanny McPhee slightly differently. But what's very clear to everyone is that by the end of the film, the children don't need Nanny McPhee anymore. The process of change is therefore complete, and it's time for her to go.
Can we get up? Can we get up, please?
Nanny McPhee's physical transformation not only made it very clear to the audience that she was changing, but hopefully signalled to them that the children were experiencing a change at the same time.
Her presence is very powerful, but there is a kind of calm and a peace right from the start, so that there's no judgment as well about her startling and bizarre appearance, because she's as loving and good at the beginning as she is at the end. But it's how the children see her. She doesn't change. She's always the same. That's the point. It's everyone else's perception that changes. You never know whether this is really her or whether the other incarnation is really her. They're all her. You know, it's not like this is the real thing. It's just, what is she? Aha, nobody knows.
This is the story of my family, of my 7 children who were all very clever, but all very, very, very naughty.
Eric, that's my teddy! Eric, stop doing it!
Having directed commercials for a number of years and having worked with children, I just always start the process by seeing as many children as possible. And I was very keen that we didn't just concentrate on children who were at theatre schools, because sometimes they're great, but sometimes they tend to be very theatrical. And that was something that I wanted to try and avoid in the acting of the children.
You get the kids in, I sit them down and I talk to them, you know, and whoever comes across as kind of bright and interesting, you get to come to a workshop. I go to agencies, I go to schools, normal schools, drama groups, after-school clubs. We got Brodie-Sangster quite early on, so we knew they all had to kind of go down like Russian dolls from him. Thomas would be probably, when you get a role like that, a boy that age, Thomas would probably be the first person you thought of, because, you know, we all know him, and also because Emma had worked with him on Love Actually. So that helps. As soon as you've got one, it's a bit like doing the border on a jigsaw. You know, you sort of think, we've got somewhere. So you fill in all the other bits.
We looked at hundreds on tape. We then started bringing them in and selecting from those hundreds, getting down probably to about 100 children, which we brought in and worked through probably about 6 workshops.
He just doesn't do anything for us anymore.
He does everything for you.
Oh, just like a girl. Yeah, go on, cry. That's so typical of you.
It's very, very important to get the casting process right, because those children had to work, I think we were shooting for about 20 weeks. They have to be committed, they have to be interested in what we're doing, and they have to be very professional and grown up, which isn't something which, you know, you would normally associate with a 7-year-old child.
It was a real issue to try to find the right child for each part in terms of looking right, behaving right, being the sort of icon of that child, but also somebody who was going to love acting and who was going to love being around 120 people every day and who was going to look forward to doing it every single morning for months and months and months.
I have found over the months that I've become much more interested in watching them than anybody else, because they're engaging, totally engaging. They're so interesting to watch.
Celia Bannerman was was the coach for the children, and her job was primarily to make sure that they knew their lines and that they understood the meaning of the lines and that they understood the story of the film in which they were acting. And I don't think the shoot would have gone, well, I know the shoot wouldn't have gone as smoothly if it hadn't have been for her.
Obviously they were very well cast, so my job's been is to get them to a stage where they can act when they get onto set. Kirk was obviously very keen on them, and one could see that you know that there was definitely you know that they would be able to do it with a bit of practice.
I'm very excited about seeing a read through with everyone. We're pretty much cast from a production point of view.
He's very good with them, you know, because he makes them laugh a lot and they adore him, and you know, and it's very relaxed, which is very nice. Except, you know, if they get a bit out of order, he's really good at calming them down.
I'm Sam, and I'm playing Sebastian. I'm Jenny, and I'm playing Lily. I'm Raphaël, and I'm playing Eric.
I'm Eliza, and I'm playing Tora. I'm Thomas, and I'm playing Simon.
My children.
I'm so scared.
Who's looking forward to seeing the tarantula? Are you sure?
Well, we're here because there are some animals in the film. Why did I write this? There's 7 children and a donkey, a pig, 2 dogs, a tarantula, a chicken, and they all have to do things, you know. So the animals belong to the children's family. So this being the second day of having the children, we've brought them to bond with the animals.
Well, I spent a lot of time with the children. I also thought it was important that we worked together, almost to try and create a family relationship, because these children needed to appear on screen as a family. And I thought that was fine, but that in order for them to do that, they needed to spend a lot of time together. And I remember we went out to the London Eye, and we went on trips, and I had dinner with them, and we would eat together, and we would rehearse together.
The point is, we've got to keep everything together for a long, long period of time. And it's the children, you know, they're so amazing, really. But they're very, very different, and it's just making sure that they all continue to get on. Although in any normal family, there will be, inevitably, patches when they don't.
Hurry up! Tie it, Chrissy! The kids are mischievous, mean, you know, just evil, really.
Children, where's Aggie?
They've been specifically written as completely different characters, and so so they all work together. So like you have Thomas, who's playing Simon.
He's the team leader. He's the one who rounds them all up, thinks of the ideas, all the naughty things. You know, he leads them.
Never mind that.
There's no more nannies. He's angry at his father that his mother's died, that it's not his fault.
You will leave me this instant. Go home at once. Go home.
You never listen! And then you've got Lily, who is like a romantic bookworm.
Lovingly. He took her lovingly by the hand.
And then you've got Rafi, who plays Eric, is like a scientist. He's like an 8-year-old going on 90.
He's sort of half brainy, half philosophical sort of kid.
I think the turning point was definitely eating the baby. Well done, Eric. And then there's like Chrissy and Sebastian.
Ooh, she is brave, but she's quite sad because Mum died.
Don't do that, Diane. That's my sore bit. You seem intent on distressing me, so now I'm going to distress you. You are to go to bed immediately.
Before supper, I'm playing Sebastian, and I'm basically the really hungry character. He always likes to be cheeky, he always sneaks down to the kitchen with the others, and he sometimes does stuff in the kitchen that's really, really naughty, naughtier than the others. The A, B and C camera comma marks.
Sam who is a sort of law unto himself, and a child whose rhythms and thoughts, I mean, I've never come across before. He's just extraordinary, but Kirk put a rule into place, which was, when we're shooting, please don't ask any questions that aren't absolutely necessary, because we haven't got the time. And we were all on the beach in dreadful weather at Lulworth Cove, and the children were sort of shivering away. We were all sitting there and trying to get shots in, and there'd be a little bit of sun, and Kirk said, right, now, listen up. We've got to do this. And Sam was sitting... And Kirk said, what is it, Sam? Is it an important question? And Sam said, yes, it is. He said, all right, well, ask it, because we've only got it. And Sam said, what's going to be in my bun? Which was a very important question for him, because it could have been something very unpleasant that he didn't want to have anything to do with, and he had to eat a bun. He wanted to know what was going to be in it.
OK, Sam, so try and undo the string.
I think probably, if I was honest, there were 2 occasions during the whole 20-week shoot where I had to sit them down. Not so much the older one. I mean, Brodie-Sangster was extraordinary and was just like an adult actor, as is Eliza Bennett. The others, quite naturally, as younger children, over the 20 weeks, I felt just lost their concentration on a couple of occasions, and we sat down, and I was very honest with them. And I just said, look, you know, you need to get back to where you were when we first started filming.
It's very, very hard. It's exhausting. I thought it'd be much easier, you know. Only do 1 take for each shot. You know, you only do the scene, actually shoot the scene once, and the cameras would be everywhere. And in the editing, they just take the cameras off. It was nothing like that.
1, take 2. AC camera mark. B camera marker.
Good. Mayhem. Ready, set it, action!
We got
I admire them very much for coping with what is, after all, not a child-friendly environment. You know, it's dark, it's dusty, it's hot, very, very hot when the daylight lamps are on. You've got to concentrate, you have to be quiet. And they just have dealt with it like real troopers.
Each scene that we have with the children, I look at it and I can see all of the things that could possibly go wrong. I mean, even if we're in the studio, you know, there's all of the tight restrictions, as always, with their education and the amount of time I have with them, and how tired are they, and are they getting bored, or are they getting, you know, are they overexcited? In general, they're very, very good. You know, they're kids and they like to have fun and have a play around, but as soon as they come onto the set, in general, they're very, very good.
The kids are great on the whole. It is exhausting, really, trying to get 7 children, including an infant, all to be concentrating all the time that you need them to, and you really can't expect that. But you couldn't have a more professional lot of kids, really. They're pretty fantastic.
The children are marvellous. 7 little kids who are not professional, some of them. 1 or 2 of them are, but the others aren't, and they're simply marvellous.
They're very talented, and just, I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they go to school for 3 hours in the day and then come back and do filming.
They've been great. I think there was one day where Sam didn't want to put jam in his face, but I think that's understandable.
It'll be very odd for them not to have each other. It'll be odd for all of us not to have each other because, oddly enough, the film, being about family as it is, has become a very strong, close-knit family.
Here we go, ready? Look at me, Eliza.
Michael Howells gave the interior sets a very strong sense of design and of colour, but when it came to looking for exterior locations which might serve as a ready-made village, we were very disappointed, and at that stage the decision was made to build the village and the Brown house from scratch. This enabled Michael to continue his design throughout the film and help promote the idea of the story as a fairy tale.
There were several decisions that went into the decision to build it rather than find it. One is that it's very hard to find any place, even in England, where you don't see power lines, where you don't see parking meters, where you don't see some signs of modern lives. But beyond that, because this is a family movie, it's a fantasy movie, we wanted to be able to have every single aspect of it be a design.
We found this location, which is just basically an empty meadow. I mean, there's nothing here, so we put in all the walls and all the plants. All the film is set in the village and in the house, so it's, if you think about it, it's one huge set of about 3 acres.
Once we agreed to build the village, we then had to decide where everything should go. And we had the luxury of saying, in this scene, Mr. Brown runs out of the undertakers, and if we put the Brown house at the end of the lane, then we've got a very nice shot where we can join both locations together. I think it all helps. If an audience sees a story taking place in a real space, then it can only help them to believe in the world in which the story is set.
I really wanted it to be one of those houses that, so when children actually see the film, you want to live in that house yourself. In the script, it just says a small brown house, and then it sort of started from that, but it's rather sort of grown actually over the different ideas we came up with. I mean, the house has got 40 tons of steel in it, so it needed a lot of planning.
Everyone who came to visit the set could not believe that it had not always been there. I had seen Penn as a field, you know, a sort of empty field, and I thought, nice field. But when we got back, there was a house built, a village, a whole village.
They're planting nettles and weeds and things, all the kind of things that would normally grow naturally. They're planting those in specifically to... A lot of the early conversations revolved around what was needed from a practical point of view and a comedy point of view. When Mr. Brown comes out of his study, it's important that there's an area under the stairs where the children can be firing porridge at him and Mrs. Quickly, and just making sure that the staircases were suitable for Mr. Brand to fall down. It's very important for me that the design has a practical purpose.
The reason we're building inside is it's just actually much more controllable, bringing the environment inside for sound and other reasons. This is our main composite set, which consists of the nursery, stairs, the hall, the lower dormitory and the upper dormitory. We're also building all the kitchen, which is subterranean in the main house. We're building that on the stage, and also the main study, but everything else we're building on location.
I just wanted children to look at it and think, what an amazing house, and why can't our house be like that? And hopefully what people like about this film will be the design and the look of the film.
Your children are out of control, Cedric.
On Remarket, 696, take 1. Oh, I am getting dizzy now.
I did knock. I did knock. I did knock.
Oh, sorry. I'm used. There was a bee.
Not that cake! I didn't spend my life in the army for this! I love the lot of you! Lolly, yay!
I've had it.
Of course you can. Of course you can. Of course you can. Stop that at once.
Simplify, take 1 A and B cameras, come on, mate.
As you know, Cedric, my word is my whatever it is.
I can't remember my lines now.
2 girls pouncing on the path.
Pouncing? Let's go back a bit.
Hello. Mr. Brown, what the are you at?
I'm very sorry, Evangeline. Ruined by a fly. Should we try it again?
Essential, dare I say, naked humanity.
Hang on, so we're getting the jelly at all?
1, 2, 3.
Early?
I think I was subtraction.
Oh, the timing, okay. 3.
So I wasn't ready for that.
No.
Oh my God, too well.
Oh, that's lovely, that is.
Ready, action!
Very serious expression. And cut there, thank you.
Mrs. Elton it was. Woo! Do you remember her?
Sorry.
Woo! Widow of Mr. Frederick Elton? Oh, no!
That's right.
But never mind, Mr. B. There's plenty more fish in the sea.
So I was supposed to be pointing.
Stop it, please.
I am Nanny McPhee.
The film Nanny McPhee was written for the screen by Emma Thompson, the Academy Award-winning screenwriter of Sense and Sensibility. Just as Sense and Sensibility was adapted from a book by Jane Austen, Nanny McPhee was adapted from 3 children's books by Christianna Brand: Nurse Matilda Goes to Town, and Nurse Matilda Goes to Hospital. Many aspects of the movie originated in the 3 books. Some of the adult characters are there, including Mr. Brown, Aunt Adelaide, Evangeline, and the cook. Scenes such as the children faking the measles, dressing up the donkey, and Aunt Adelaide's attempt to take one of the girls away. Then, of course, there's Nanny McPhee's dreadful appearance and the mysterious changes that occur as the children become less naughty.
She was very ugly. The ugliest person you ever saw in your life. But what you noticed most of all was that she had one huge front tooth, sticking right out like a tombstone over her lower lip. You never, in the whole of your life, ever saw such a tooth.
But the books also underwent some changes on their way to the screen. In the books, there are so many Brown children that most of them don't even have names. In the film, there are only 7. In the books, the children's mother is alive and well. In the film, she has died, and Mr. Brown is being forced to remarry. But perhaps the most important change is the name of the main character.
We realised quite early on that Nurse Matilda was not going to be a name we could use because nurse, the word nurse, no longer means what it used to mean in Victorian England, where nurses were in fact nannies.
The person you need is Nanny McPhee.
And Matilda we couldn't use because of Roald Dahl's book. I thought, no, I've got to change it completely. We went through so many versions of names. We thought perhaps because it was a story about the children that it should be called the Bothersome Browns or the dreadful Dohertys or whatever. But in the end, it needed to be the name of the central character. We settled on Nanny McPhee thinking, well, we can change it, and we never did. And I'm very glad we didn't, because it works just right.
The stories that inspired Christianna to write the Nurse Matilda books originated in the mid-1800s.
The fascinating thing about these stories is that they're much, much older than the books. Because like all great stories for children, they were once told to specific children. And they were in fact told by a man who invented Nurse Matilda in the 1800s, and that was Christianna Brand's great-grandfather, who told his children the stories. So whatever naughtiness his children had been up to, he invented Nurse Matilda, and then he told a story about how Nurse Matilda dealt with that naughtiness. And then, of course, it was such a powerful, fantastic story that they told it to their children, and that person told it to their children, and 2 of those children were Christianna Brand, the author of the books, and Edward Ardisoni, her cousin, who was the illustrator.
Born Mary Christianna Milne, Christianna, or Quiff as she was sometimes called by her family, was born in Malaysia in 1907 and later lived in India. When she was still a little girl, she was sent to England, where she was educated at a convent.
Christianna loved the convent. She absolutely adored it. It was an ordered life. I think she liked that. I think she rather enjoyed being taught what little nuns teach one, and just the general fun of it. And she liked being part of a large family as well.
Before becoming a writer, Christianna worked as a model, a dancer, a governess, and a shop assistant. It's reported that while working in the shop, she found herself fantasizing about getting rid of an annoying co-worker. And those fantasies led to the writing of her first crime novel, Death in High Heels. She eventually became very well known for her crime novels, which were highly acclaimed and won prestigious awards both in England and America. But Christianna never forgot the Nurse Matilda stories she'd heard as a child, and in 1964 she wrote the first Nurse Matilda book, followed by its 2 sequels. All of the books featured illustrations by Christianna's cousin, Edward Ardisoni, who had the same grandparents as Christianna, and therefore grew up hearing those same stories about the horrible Brown children and their scary-looking nanny. Edward was already a well-known writer and illustrator of children's books by the time his cousin Christianna wrote her first Nurse Matilda book. So he was an obvious choice to illustrate it. He was older than Christianna, having been born in what is today known as Vietnam in the year 1900. Edward was sent to boarding school in England, and from an early age he showed an aptitude for painting and drawing. He started out in an office job, but eventually his father gave him some money to live on while he pursued art full-time. Edward went on to become a highly respected illustrator. He illustrated his own books, those of other authors, and was also commissioned to work as an official war artist during World War II.
I was invited to be a war artist, which he was delighted to do. He didn't like wars particularly, he was not into fighting at all, but he loved the people and the way people cope with war.
He created his own series of children's stories about a little boy named Tim, and by the end of his career he had written 25 books and illustrated 150 others, including the 3 Nurse Matilda books by his cousin Christianna Brand. Christianna died at the age of 81, 9 years after her cousin Edward.
We're all enormously proud of Christianna and Edward's achievements. I shudder to think of the effects of Nurse Matilda on a modern nursery, but at least children enjoy it, and they're very proud of them indeed.
Their most famous collaboration, the Nurse Matilda books, have lived on and can now delight future generations in the form of the film Nanny McPhee.
Good night, children.
This is an alternative opening. It shows the history of naughty children and their nannies. My wife actually played the Japanese nanny, but it was considered to be too long when we put the film together, and we just wanted to get on with the story a little bit quicker, so that's the reason why it was cut.
We must begin our story, sad to say, with a brief word on the subject of ill-behaved children. As I'm sure you are aware, there have been troublesome offspring since the beginning of time. Take, for example, the case of Bog, the horrid cave child. Or, for instance, little Achmet and Ramses, the vicious twins of ancient Egypt. Or, horrible to relate, Obu, Nobu and Shobu, the vile sisters of medieval Japan. So many stories, so little time. Let us turn, therefore, without further ado, to the Brown children of Finchley Lane in the London suburb of Totteridge, whose legendary unpleasantness we are about to examine in greater depth. The Brown children, whom we shall meet momentarily, were all very clever and all very badly behaved. They... But first, a word on their progenitors. Their mother, Mrs. Brown, through dint of her heroic childbearing efforts, was, as is so common in stories about children, dead. Their father, Mr. Brown, worked from dawn till dusk, 7 days a week, as a make-up artist at the local funeral parlour, Midgewaller and Sons. Unfortunately, the wage from this establishment could not begin to cover the costs of 7 children, which was why his income was amplified by a monthly allowance from his late wife's aunt, Lady Adelaide Stitch. A worrier by nature, Mr. Brown had thought that his family crisis could not possibly get worse. He was wrong.
They've eaten the baby!
Derek Jacobi and Patrick Barlow's double act as Ween and Giles was proven to be so entertaining that Emma wrote another scene. It didn't make the cut in the end because we just wanted to keep the story very focused and keep everything moving along. But this scene shows them locking up the undertakers late at night, and they're discussing whether the next morning they should still continue to jump out of their coffins to frighten Mr. Brown, or whether they should take the dramatic decision to jump out of the cupboard.
I've had a bit of an idea, Mr. Giles.
What's that then, Mr. Queen?
Well, next time, let's hide in the cupboard. Not in the coffins?
No, the cupboard. It's unexpected, see? I mean, he won't be expecting us.
If you catch my drift. Am I sensing concern, Mr. Giles? I admit I am concerned, yes, Mr. Wheen. You read me right as ever. It's just that coffins is more humorous than cupboards, to my way of thinking. And if you're asking me, Mr. Wheen...
I am indeed.
In my humble opinion, coffins is funny and cupboards ain't.
Oh, right you are, Mr. Giles, right you are. Coffins it is.
Mr. Brown left early this evening.
He did, without bidding us adieu, I noted.
Odd, that.
Very odd.
This next scene was filmed for a couple of reasons. First of all, it showed Evangeline attempting to post a letter to Mrs. Quickly, but there were a number of letters featured within the film, and at one point we found that the letters were getting very confusing, so that's one of the reasons why we cut this scene. But the other reason why this scene was written and filmed in the first place was to throw Evangeline and Mr. Brown into a more intimate situation than they would normally be used to. This was to give the audience the sense that Mr. Brown and Evangeline might be becoming more romantically involved with each other. But when the film was put together, it was clear that the performances from Colin and Kelly were doing this anyway, so it didn't seem necessary to show them getting closer in the scene.
Listen to this, dear. I am coming with the express intention of easing your financial burden. Maybe she thought the better of my having to remarry. Cost of a wedding and so forth. Perhaps I won't have to go through with it after all. Mrs. Quickly. Evangeline.
Mr. Brown! Arthur, you at?
I'm very sorry, Evangeline. May I just have the, quickly.
Thought that letter was urgent.
Well, no, I'm glad you mentioned that because, well, it was urgent, but, well, no, it might not be. No, what I mean, what I'm trying to say...
I know what you're up to, Mr. Brown. Considering what you're up to, perhaps it isn't sensible to be seen walking about in public arm in arm with your scullery maid.
Once the children have prevented Mr. Brown from marrying Mrs. Quickly, Mr. Brown soon realises that Aunt Adelaide's allowance is about to stop. So he starts to gather a number of possessions together in his house with a view to selling them. And we introduce a character called Mr. Saplis, who's a very dodgy local businessman. I'd worked with David Kelly on Waking Ned, and he'd very kindly agreed to come over from Ireland to play this very small part, which made it even more difficult to cut the scene. But when we looked at the film as a whole, it just became very confusing to introduce a new character for such a short scene.
Nice face, this.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I couldn't possibly part with that. That's... Excuse me, could you not? It's just that's particularly...
Give you a sovereign for it.
A sovereign? And I fear we have no choice, dearest.
Did you just call me dearest?
In an attempt to explore the double act between Wheen and Giles, I improvised a scene where they were handing a letter over to Mr. Brown. But again, this was one of the letters that we felt were confusing the plot of the film, and unfortunately, although this is a very fun scene, it had to be cut.
Morning, Mr. B.
Good morning, Mr. Giles. Mr. Wheen.
Thought we'd get you that time.
No, not this time.
Nice tea dance, Mr. B.
Oh, lovely, I shouldn't wonder.
You was accompanying a lady, I take it. One of the widows, perhaps?
No, I didn't even get there. Disaster. children, you know.
We do know. We've said it before and we'll say it again, Mr. B. It's not funerals as you should be in the business of. It's christenings. Oh, another lady dropped by this morning with a billet-doux for you, Mr. B. Oh. Mrs. Elton it was. Oh. Do you remember her, Mr. B? Oh. Oh. Widow of Mr. Frederick Elton? Oh. She was in a right old lather, she was. Oh, but don't worry, Mr. B. Plenty more fish in the sea.
Good morning. Just excuse me a moment, would you? Dear Mr. Brown, I sat at Mrs. Riley's entirely alone
for 1.5 hours yesterday, and can only say that a person who has subjected me to that degree of social embarrassment
should not be asking for second chances.
Yours, etc., Mrs. Prudence Elton.
Oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. What's your wife like? Never mind. Less than a month to go, there's nothing for it. It'll have to be that woman. The dreadful one.
One of our editors put together a version of the Tea Party and presented it in a way so that it looked like a silent movie. He sped up the action and made it black and white. And it was a lot of fun, and we tried it in one of our screenings, but we found that it confused some of the children to have such a dramatic change in style. But it's worth looking at anyway. This next shot is part of a deleted scene and shows Cook relaxing in the kitchen, safe in the knowledge that Nanny McPhee has got the house under control. What none of us knew was that Colin Firth, who had finished the film 2 weeks earlier and I believe was on holiday, secretly returned to the studio, dressed up as Nanny McPhee in full makeup, and made a surprise appearance in this shot. If you look very carefully at the staircase in the back of the kitchen, then you'll see Colin Firth making his debut appearance as Nanny McPhee.
Lesson number 6. When you've finished a job, stay away and never, ever, ever come back. I'll be here as long as you neither need me nor want me. Good night, children.